Series, everybody. Great to see you all. Hope you had a wonderful break. For ththose we haven't seen yet, Bao, we're really excited about this presentation. Bao Tran, a PhD student in complex networks and systems track at the Luddy School, studies the spread of misinformation and ways to combat it, as we saw in the paper for today, which is titled "The Power of Decentralized Platforms: Why All Social Media Suck and How They Can Suck Less." We would love to know the latter. We really need help. We're relying on you to solve all of our problems. Bao, thank you so much. Looking forward to this presentation, and I'm happy to help keep the queue afterward. So.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for coming, and thanks for the opportunity to present my work. This will be a little bit more of a brainstorm, given the new development in the
Which one?
the Elon show and some new social media platforms. Yeah, so as you can see, with the very catchy title, so you and this is yeah, so this will be a little bit different from the paper that I sent out. So in that paper, I tried to conceptualize social media platforms as a commons, drawing analogies between the physical resource system and conceptualize attention as a type of resource and high quality information as a public good. And argue that Austrian frameworks of resource typo there, management frameworks can be used to study collective action problems, which on social media is misinformation and things of that nature. Yeah, and so the argument is that social media researchers should embrace more of these principles and use the rich vocabulary that comes with the literature. But since everything that has happened with Twitter, so a brief is that Elon bought Twitter and reduced a lot of staffs and changed.
Quite tragic.
Change things, kind of restructure Twitter, introduce a new paid version, a new paid tier. Also, sorry. It's okay. Yeah, and so this prompts people to migrate to Mastodon, an alternative social media platform. And since then, Mastodon has seen a lot of growth. Also with everything being in one hand, making decisions right now, it prompts us to think about the future of social media platforms. So I want to talk about Mastodon. Also explains the decentralized nature of the platform and how it helps prevents collective action progress on social media. So a quick introduction is a messaging platform similar to Facebook or Twitter, where user can create a general or topic specific account. So if you create a general account, it will be at mastodon.social, and you can create any other topic specific accounts. So some of the instances are scholar.social or datasci.social, and you can create and users can create as many instances as they want. The way Mastodon works is that it's just a protocol for to distribute messages. So the message coming into Mastodon would be routed to many instances that you follow, and you can see messages from there. So it rests on many servers so that no single entity can own the Fediverse. And the name Fediverse come from a suite of products. So they have PeerTube and PixelFed, which are YouTube-like service and service. And also this many servers create resilience to outages. So if one server fails, the rest will not. And they're, yeah. So I'm arguing that Mastodon is truly a public square rather than really so the source code of Mastodon is free and open source. It's also very transparent. Because the code is open source, people can fork it and make modifications as they like. What Mastodon provide is a protocol to communicate. So there is no algorithms, no curation, also no financial incentives for administrators to make decisions. Also, user can switch instances with ease, and because of this, if an administrator wants their instance to have many users, they should commit or make it apparent that they are committing to common laws and the community's code of conduct. This competition is what makes Mastodon instances a truly marketplace of ideas, I would say. And also all of this is if you think about the fact that Mastodon doesn't have a business model, the moderators are volunteers, and the servers can also be created affordably. Also, yeah, the administrators accept donation, but they are not paid by any means. If you think about that, it might be easy to say that Mastodon is just a fad or is a temporary shelter to wait out the Twitter storm, but actually it has undergone a massive growth even before the Twitter migration. Yeah, so within a span of a couple months with the migration, it has gained more than 2 million followers of users. So, and another argument against it is that spin-off social media platforms are usually become a niche for extremists like Gab or 4chan. But Mastodons have these mechanism in place that that prevents that from happening, and I will talk about that. Yeah. So the platform attracts people who agree to a covenant and will collectively monitor it. So when you sign into Mastodon, the first thing that it will show you is the ground rules. If you you can agree to this or just exit and do not create an account. As with for Facebook, the first thing that they show you that, oh, sign up is quick and easy. And there is actually nothing else. It's actually pretty quick and easy. And also another tool that it uses is the federation, because it follows a federation model. Each instance can have a choice to isolate from other instances. So, for example, this is a block list of a server, and there are and it lists out the servers whose posts they cannot see with an explanation. So this instance is blocked because it posts a lot of misinformation. This instance is blocked because it involves conspiracy theories, or this one with harassment. So you can think of this as a democratic process where users get to choose who to listen from. So with this, the platforms was resilient to a massive flock of Gap users. So Gap is an extremist platform, and there were 1 million users from Gap trying to join Mastodon. And they actually are still on there, but their hate speech and misinformation were not spread further into the other instances. There is another thing, another mechanism, which is content warnings. So it's just a way to collapse content. So for example, here, it just puts, if you put a content warning on your piece of content, it will have a button that lets you show more or show less of the content if you choose to do so. And many of the Mastodon instances actually have very strict rules to that you should use these content warnings. And if you think of collective action as a resource, then I think this can be considered one of the mechanisms to preserve that resource. One of the things that I'm interested in is whether we can use the principles of governing the commons to explain this success of Mastodon. And another larger question is that should decentralization be the default for all social media rather than being corporate owned? So yeah, so what if I guess in the future there would always be companies making new shinier platforms with a lot of curation and useful recommendation algorithm. But it can be that when we talk about platforms, they should only be a protocol rather than something that is owned by one person. Oh yeah, and actually, yeah, we can talk about this later. I just forgot some points. Well, Mastodon is not without drawbacks. Although it's centralized, it happens that a lot of the instances are hosted on only a few servers, and also because there are so many instances, people who are not tech savvy will just choose to join on the general server. So this concentrates power on a lot of on only a few individuals, and one of those are administrators. So moderators or administrators are mostly volunteers, so they work overload with little to no compensation. And actually, this is a known problem for online communities. Because of this, it's not guaranteed that these moderators will continue to work on the community. So if they choose to abandon the community, this will become problematic because it will disconnect the social graph, and there is no way to reach. It will create disconnection and isolate instances. So I think it's worthwhile to investigate moderator churn rate and also work on how we can help moderators to do their job at scale. As I mentioned in the paper, moderators yeah, I think it's worth it too. It's a promising direction to look into moderators. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Bao Tran. So I'll keep the queue both here and online. So you want to kick us off? That'd be great.
Thank you so much. It's exciting. I've heard a lot about Mastodon but haven't been, so it's
right.
nice to hear from you and to
Signed up for
learn it. So I guess I have two questions. So one is that what is the difference either for you scholarly or for like users between automation and algorithms? And I think I'll save my second question for later.
Do you mean are you talking about the way the content is shown?
Yeah, just so on a previous slide, one of the draws that you described about Mastodon is that it doesn't have an algorithm for the way that it presents the material, that it's like just a chronological presentation. And then here thinking about like automated moderation, to me, that sounds like that is in some ways probably kind of an algorithm too. I don't know a lot about algorithms, but like that sounds also like an algorithm because it is sort of like the computer making a decision as programmed by a human of how to present the material or not. And so what is the line between like an automated moderation and an algorithm in deciding what to promote or not promote? And like how do you in your research or do people who are like building Mastodon decide what is the line?
I see. So yeah, you're right. I would say that automatic moderation is a kind of an algorithm, but it will have to go through because it's half automated. So it would have to go through human annotation. So a human would look at that and decide whether this content is to be deleted or not. But because I guess they embody the values of the community, that would I would say that would be more organizing at a local level than having one person top down just deciding how to show content and what content to be.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that like like one of the appeals of Mastodon is this like digital social media is the like humanity of it, that like the draw that there's like a human touch even in the automated processes. That's interesting if like people still want this like digital way to connect. But how do you connect digitally and have it still feel human?
Yeah, I think a lot of work still have to be done on how Mastodon is so successful at keeping abuse at bay, because on Reddit you also have that process of automatic moderation, but it's still a lot of work. And in some of the work that has looked that interviewed moderator on Mastodon, they say that their work is easy. So yeah, so that's actually an interesting look into.
Yeah, Diego, please.
Yeah, very interesting topic. Congratulations for all of that. I was wondering, in your research, how do you approach the element of like informational asymmetry that is going to happen in these kind of communities, people with a lot of technical knowledge and others as me that don't understand anything in those kind of coding elements. And my second question will be about the concept of like the meta common, about the values of how you are going to decide. It says don't use misinformation, yet, but who actually decide what is a misinformation? We are thinking about political issues, for instance, one left-handed or right-handed probably could have different opinions of what is misinformation, or is a very complex topic about how do you see that in this network?
Up to Elon, right?
So I think, so in Mastodon, some could argue that the federation or the block list that I mentioned is a way to create isolated echo chambers. So if you have left-leaning instances, just block every right-leaning instances, that would create just a vacuum of information, right? But that is already happening on the other platforms also. So I say it's still a problem, but the way that people come up with, so this set of rules, the ground rules, this is the common rule across all instances. But for each instance, you still have more granular rules, and it can be very specific. I haven't seen rules, well, there is a difference between misinformation and disinformation also. So some rules would just say, oh, don't intentionally mislead. But yeah, you're right. It would be up to the moderators or the community to decide a lot of that. And worse could still happen.
Thanks. Good question, Jacob. Yeah, please.
So thank you very much for the very interesting presentation. So actually, I don't know so much about technical or technological part, but I'm just curious about anything about the nature of the community of user of the Mastodon, because actually I also created the Mastodon account when the many scholars stop using Twitter, then many people actually went to the Mastodon. I created the Mastodon account, but actually to me, it's not that user friendly. I forgot my password. Then I requested the password several times, but I have never received any, password. So I actually stopped using Mastodon. So I don't know, to me, compared to Twitter, Mastodon is a bit difficult to use as a user. So also the academics, I don't know, as far as I see from the Twitter, many academics actually move on to the Mastodon, but I don't know what is the nature of the user population of Mastodon. My impression is more like toward the left or liberal side compared to Twitter. Also in terms of the knowledge of technology, users should be have high skills about technical skills. So that is actually the questions. Maybe not related to your direct question.
Yeah, I think you're right. So there so there is the science Twitter with a lot of scholars, and I think they migrate, a lot of them migrated to Mastodon during the migration, including you. But I do think that because Mastodon is independently developed, and a lot of there is still a lack of usability, so it attracts a lot of early adopters or tech enthusiasts. But maybe that sample is what make it less prone to all these problems on social media. But if in the future there more efforts are spent onto these models, and maybe it will be more usable and attract more users. But actually it has been growing steadily. I have not really looked into the actual numbers or the demographics of the user base, but that's my guess. Another problem that I see with the lack of usability is the lack of curation, because we are drawn a lot to topics that interest us. So
Mhm.
it could both be a good and a bad thing that this platform doesn't have, you know, recommendation. Or you would have to find the, yeah, even, they don't even have friend recommendation, so it can be hard to navigate.
I was just wondering, governing the Mastodon might be easier compared to governing a Twitter or governing the Twitter community or governing the Trump social media community. So that's my,
It'd be a useful case study to ground the discussion a bit more because each of these communities is pretty different. Please, yeah.
Thank you for the presentation. My question is about it's difficult to me understand what are the real advantage the decentralized architecture of Mastodon, because I understand well, here's the people is clustered by values and interests, but probably you can have the same in a Facebook group where you have a moderator that defines some rules for the group and people can join, and if they don't respect the rules of the Facebook group, they can shout of the group. So what is the in practice the benefit of the decentralized system? Because for me, it seems like it's a better way to moderate in some sense, but you just have the clustered people that can connect with others. So it's like I don't know, maybe some people can make bridge between this cluster of networks. And so I want to understand a little better what's the benefit of the decentralized system here.
So actually, if you can create your account from an instant, so it can be found at Ostrom, but I can still see a federated timeline, which is content from every other that is posted. But I think the most advantage, the best advantage of it is that it doesn't hinge on one entity to make all the decisions. So if one day, someone, like no one can buy it and just make arbitrary decisions to just show their posts on everybody else's feed. Since there is no, and because there is no corporate interest, people are not, there is no incentive to for algorithmic bias of how to show the content. So I would say users would have to do more work, but that's but at least they have the autonomy in deciding what they can see.
She will see Joyce and then, Gustavo after.
Are you familiar with ActivityPub?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'd love to hear your comments on how, like Mastodon is sort of Fediverse 1.0, right? And we're going on to ActivityPub where, WordPress just hired the guy who created the ActivityPub plugin for WordPress, and 45% of websites have WordPress. So this is the decentralized social media. The Fediverse itself is actually coming. So I'd love to hear your perspective on sort of, back to your paper, if the common pool resource is attention, now it gets even more split. What can you draw those lines a little bit more, like how could that be more realized as a common pool resource, and in what ways could it be managed?
That's a very good question. I'm actually still struggling with the conceptualization of that attention pool. There is individual attention, collective attention, and even still the literature on how different algorithms affect people attention span is still pretty much not there. There's a lot of differences. Yeah, so that's one piece that I'm still struggling with. And I think, and when you talk about activity, do you mean there is still one guy who is in charge of that protocol? And
Oh,
then,
no, it's a W3C protocol standard, and they're using it in Tumblr, they're using it in a lot of places. It's just people are creating a plugin that they can use it. And then now you can, without Twitter in the middle, you can communicate, whether it's a comment on your blog or, I mean, it's obviously way, way early days, but with like 2 million users on Mastodon, there's a bunch of people that are interested in having a way to federate and be in control of their own destinies around their own social media.
yeah, I think they're already doing by forking the code and then, yeah, make their modifications. So that would bring even more complexities into this problem. Yeah, but I guess it's still well, this is the biggest user search ever. So the 2 million is only in 3 months, 3 months back. So I think we would have to wait out and see like how this infrastructure can wait against that search. And,
Gustavo?
So, first of all, I'm completely ignorant on this. So my comment could be disregarded. So, but using a little bit of econ idea sets. I'm struggling understanding what's the problem here at the social level, because essentially what's going on is like, well, now we are seeing that there is competition, that then different platforms are offering different set of rules, some more strict, some stricter, some looser. So it's like you can sign to Facebook if you want, or Mastodon with different rules. To some extent, there could be optimal, selection of people and matching depending on what you want in terms of rules. And including the possibility of not signing for any of those, like myself. So for example, now you convince me that I don't want to sign for Mastodon because those rules pretty much eliminate humor from my perspective. If you accept those things, humor is out. So I'm not in Facebook because I don't want my mom to know what I do. So that's why I don't have any social network, but still I'm a very particular animal. I mean, it's like, so what's the problem? It seems to me like this is a nice example of finally competition working. So we started with a situation where like there was a lack of competition, and now there is competition, and now competition is essentially, it's like different firms are accommodating or a different type of customers. Okay, so something like that. And then the second comment is also kind of a financial issues, like well, at the end, these companies, organizations, they need to collect enough revenue to pay for the cost, okay? So the main problem with Twitter is that essentially they were not producing enough revenue. So they just suffer a hostile takeover. And then what happened after hostile takeovers? The same things that happen for any sector of the economy. You fire workers and start trying to get revenues to accommodate the finances of the company. So is Mastodon going to face the same type of problems, or do you think that they have some kind of better business plan to come up with some revenue to pay for the cost? Because the costs are there, so they cannot be avoided. And again, not much about this, so it could be pretty silly comments or questions. Sorry.
I think the point that you make about the social problem is very good. Well, there are people who choose not to go onto any of these social media, but on the other hand, there are people who get sucked into the social media, and there are actually real world consequences. Like for the Capitol riot, people people were organizing on the social media. And there is not, and we're social animals, so when a person choose to join a platform, they add on to the critical mass, right? Their friends would also join. And if a platform is not optimally designed to, or they intentionally display content in the way that is misleading, that I think that's a big problem.
But I think the goal of a platform is essentially to people to communicate, not to, to communicate in certain ways. It's to facilitate communication, and then you can facilitate communication to start a war or to start a peace treaty. So that's a different type of problem. So essentially, the goal of this is, yes. So you can use wheels in a, in a car or in a whatever, or in a military equipment, but still the goal of the wheel is just to facilitate having a transportation system. So it's I think I will be more interested in like digging deeper, but because maybe there are some issues, no? So it happens to me, for example, in YouTube, you start thinking, like, just try for a week picking only conservative article or liberal articles. It's very easy after 1 or 2 weeks, you end up very, very polarized in terms of what things you are offered. Okay. So, well, I would like to know more about that. So essentially, it's that what's going on. So they are working as polarizing mechanisms. How exactly? What piece of the algorithm is doing that, and to what extent with that new rules, new algorithm, you deal with that problem or you don't deal with that problem. So that, do you think that that's something doable, feasible to think about those problems?
Yeah, I think it would be interesting to look at whether users on Mastodon are prevented from that polarizing threat. But the thing is, there is no algorithm. So everything is transparent on this platform. It actually is working just agnostically as a message delivering platform, and that's it. It does not, people can choose the community that they're interested in and move among those, but they are not, there is no part in the decision making of what to see and what not to see that is not on the users.
Humor already excluded. Essentially, maybe the reason is like you come up with very strict rules to the point that you eliminate everything that it's different. No, that's why there is no problems. So if we are all, so if I discuss only with economists like me, I almost know this. So essentially, it's like as soon as you start opening up things, then clashes appears. No,
That is true, and you can still see discussions happening on the other side too, and choose to engage or not.
We have one comment online, then we'll return back to these two. I just had a quick one after that as well. So Milash online said, thanks for the presentation. I was wondering, do you have thoughts about how this approach of decentralization and defederation can be used in the sharing, the platform economy, decentralized communities like Uber or Airbnb? So I guess maybe to test that out, to what extent is this unique potentially to social media? Or do you feel like this could have some, resonance in other peer-to-peer communities?
I have not thought about that.
And that's okay.
Yeah, but very interesting to think about.
Is this a standalone paper as well, or is this kind of part of your bigger dissertation? Like, is this?
Yeah, it's part of my dissertation.
Okay. So maybe you could, deal with this in another, if you choose to, another aspect of it. Okay, so please.
Just a small follow-up question about the algorithm thing, because I think algorithms are not by default negative. So I really love when Netflix suggests me a movie that based it in my preference. And I really like when I see content similar to the content that I like. So it's part of the things. So what's the limit to decide that works are not or negative is positive?
That's true. I think, yeah, algorithm can be good and bad as with most things. But there are, unintended biases that can be introduced into the process of developing the algorithm. So I think a way that these companies can make their algorithm better is to make the algorithm explainable. So a lot of these algorithms are not, or black box and not explainable. Yeah, so I think that's one point, and they can make it transparent, but it's not the case for many of the forms that are having mass users right now.
Please.
I would just say that the comment, it sounds to me like the Bloomington Byway, so
Good point.
That was good.
stay tuned. I also, so on your last slide where you talk about automation of moderation, so that seems like, so if we assume that the that like the current setup, there's too much pressure on moderators and that needs to be released somehow, and automation is one sort of release valve. I'm curious, like, I imagine this must have existed at some point just because the world is so big, but like, what about a totally flat structure where there's not like moderators and users, but everyone is a moderator? Like, what if the responsibility for moderation was the like equally distributed among all people?
I think that would come to common sense, right? So that you can tell people not litter, but it will depend on them too. I don't know. Or like you can instill in them a sense of common good, but I don't think that as we have seen, I don't think that would be viable. Or what do you think?
I don't know. I mean, I kind of want to be hopeful. I think there are examples of, like there are lots of people who don't litter or who don't litter in certain places. And so I think that it could, like, I don't know why, if like, I don't know, I live in a co-op and our house operates in like a very flat way. Obviously, there's still like, some people have lived there longer than other people. And so there's always differences, but like everybody does the dishes. And so what if, like, are there examples of online worlds where everybody does the dishes of moderating?
I think that happens in very homogeneous communities. And when you have more heterogeneous population, more conflicts would happen, and there will be more conflicts in values, and that would be harder to. But yeah, in communities where a sense of belonging is stronger, people tend to, from what I've seen, tend to follow that, be their own moderator.
And by homogeneity, do you mean like homogeneity of values or?
Yeah.
I'm remembering in, I'll send you a few links after this, but one of them is a chapter in a book that I wrote a few years ago. I'm remembering a paper by a guy named Don Howard, who's at Notre Dame. And he did this thing on civic virtue, and he classified all these different online communities, like, as I'm remembering, like Lockean hybrids, and like all these different fund designations he had based on the degree of moderation that's happening. And some of those, I'm thinking that actually that could be useful to help you kind of frame this out a little bit, to think about the different degrees of moderation, some more case studies for where it actually has happened and maybe has been successful. And that kind of gets to my bigger comment about, the paper. There's a lot of methodologies you throw in here. And I'm kind of wondering, as I'm hearing you describe it more, if you could start, like if I was starting from scratch with structuring this, you could start with some constitutional design up front, So like, hey, what are the rules, right? In use, as you say, but what are the rules? And for something like this, it's going to be really dependent on frankly, the jurisdiction you're talking about. Like if you want to limit the universe here just to the US, great, right? But then you're going to need a little bit on the First Amendment and Section 230 to kind of frame this out, right? And I'll send you a piece that we did on defending democracy and in the digital age a few years ago. That'll give you kind of that framing. But those are kind of like the rules that all these companies have to live by at the highest level, like Section 230, which is the liability shield that's being litigated at the Supreme Court right now. Then from there, you can dive into, okay, but this gives some opportunities for self-governance. Here's what those look like. And here are some examples for how that's, played out. And then on that one, that's where you can loop in either it's IAD, maybe it's governing knowledge commons framework. And you can spend a good chunk of your time there talking about the evaluative criteria that you're interested in, which could be where this degree of, whether call it civic virtue, whatever you will, kind of comes into play, right? And that, you don't feel like you have to go down that road, but if you wanted to kind of have this be a little more streamlined, that could be one way to do this. And then you could have, the SES and all the other stuff come up, maybe in other points in your dissertation, but this would be one way to describe what's happening, at least in social media, at least in the US. So the EU is pretty different. So it kind of just depends on the jurisdictions you're most interested in. Other questions, comments? Diego, sorry, yeah, please.
Very interesting this conversation. Last 2 weeks, I tried to be involved in all of these cyber things just to understand a little bit your paper. And one of the things that I'm interested in your opinion about the sustainability of these kind of networks. I started to see like parallels with the internet as a whole, like starting as a very communal effort, and with the facts that we are going to have cost, there started to appear some companies that are going to help with the kind of interface, and that way we create a financial sustainability for the thing, but also comes with powers and all of these issues. Therefore, in this case of Mastodon, how do you see it in the future? Do you consider that this kind of communal element will be possible because of the cost of people that could voluntarism, but probably don't have time because of the knowledge? I don't know.
Yeah, to come back to the point about cost that I forgot to address, I think this is just my guess, but I think it would come to a point that there are software or freemium. This will become freemium. So there will be softwares that help people to, or people that are not as tech savvy to navigate these fediverse, and like maybe it would help. Maybe there will be layouts and there will be filtering, like just with emails, like with how people deal with email that have a spam filtering service, and people could pay for that. Yeah, a lot of the cost right now is on people who have a strong interest in having a community on their server.
I have one comment related to
Please
this.
do, then we'll turn to Brett. Yeah.
So ultimately there are revenue, and it's pretty much similar to the media. No, it's either advertisements or subscriptions fees. So essentially, that's again, it's some sense that's pretty similar to classical media. No? Well, or donors. No? So essentially, which I think in classical media never play such a big role. No. So it's so if you want to sustain this, is like either use advertisements, or like Twitter, they are moving in the direction of charging subscriptions for the users. No? So it's for some features, it might be not for all the features. Sure, yeah.
From the CEO, at least, I don't think he has any for making revenue out of this, but yeah,
So Brett, I'll just read off what you have in the chat, but please feel free to elaborate or interject, okay? So Brett said, Freshman, I have a few comments, questions. I think the focus on community moderation makes sense. This seems like a topic that fits rather well in the governing knowledge commons field. As we just mentioned, there are many case studies to be done focused on different social media-based knowledge commons communities. Some have been done. In fact, the set of relevant resources shared, moderated, and so on includes much more than attention. Attention as a CPR doesn't make much sense to me. I can talk more about that. So maybe you can talk more about that, Brett, if you're able. And then he says to respond somewhat to the comment of an earlier exchange, there very well may be competition in among social media platforms, apps, etc. But social media generates a wide range of external effects, of many, most of which are not efficiently managed by competition. So it kind of brings up the externalities point. So Brett, did you want to maybe mention it or elaborate a little bit on the attention as a CPR point? And then feel free to respond, Bao, as you'd like.
Sure. Yeah. Can you hear me fine?
Yes, perfect.
All
Love
right,
the
cool.
picture too.
Oh, thanks. Sorry I don't have my video on. It's just I'm just got back from my class. I didn't open up my screen. So the camera's down. Yeah, so this is a great paper. The whole topic is fantastic. I like the integration of the SES stuff a lot. And I'm thinking we need to do more of that with the GKC work that we do. I was surprised that the GKC stuff wasn't sort of a part of it because the fundamental set of resources being exchanged on social media communities is various kinds of knowledge. It's knowledge, data, information, personal information, etc. So it's sort of it's a perfect example of a knowledge commons. And we've done case studies on things like Wikipedia and stuff. And there's Facebook, there's communities like activist communities that arrange their affairs on Facebook, and like in the Privacy Commons book from a few years ago, there's a couple of case studies that look at that kind of stuff. So there's a lot to leverage, I think, that would connect well with this project, and I think it's great. So I can go on and on about that kind of stuff, but the thing about the attention, I think, like conceptualizing what you actually mean by what's the shared resources among the members of a commons communities is critical to doing any kind of commons work. And I wasn't very clear like what the set of resources are, but when you think about attention, it's kind of the most rivalrous resource. It's the scarce resource that people are vying for the most. It's the most, it's the, there's a couple of different ways to conceptualize it. The way I would tend to conceptualize it it's really the bridge between your inner self and the external environment, even when other people are part of that external environment. So your attention, or any individual's attention, is a incredibly limited capacity, scarce resource that connects your mind or your free will or yourself, or however you want to philosophically think about that, to others. And so the idea of thinking of it as a common pool resource, I understand that the collective aggregation of lots of people's individual attention, meaning their selves being directed on a common thing, because it's the individual attention is an input into something that is collective. And then the question I have for you is, what's that something that is the collective resource? I think to say that attention is the common pool resource is kind of like missing a step. And that missing step actually might be significant when you come to when it comes down to diagnosing dilemmas and governance challenges. So I hope that's helpful, but it's a super interesting paper, and I'm sorry I hopped in like 10 minutes late. I was coming from my class. Thanks.
All right, Brett. No, thanks for the thoughts. Bao, please. I know that's a lot to digest, so.
Yeah, I agree about the conceptualization of attention. It's for me, when I think about it, I think more about collective attention, like the aggregation. But then when you talk about the collective, what constitutes that? So there are there are different, like the collective is made of individuals who have different goals, and it may shift when you go from one community to the other, and that also shifts with their values. So yeah, any pointer to working out that piece would
Absolutely. I'll include, I'm making a little list of resources, so we'll include some GKC stuff and we can do a follow-up. So thanks a lot, Brett. Joyce, yeah, please.
Just on that point, I am also very intrigued by the concept of attention as the common pool resource. And there's this thought process that could go along the lines that Gustavo was talking about. It's like, what is the platform? What are they really doing? Like, what's the economic benefit? They're selling attention is what they are. So you could make this. They're just trying to get the most attention back and forth so they can monetize that attention. And that's why it goes to polarizing things, because people are drawn to that. So what's interesting in your thought about common pool resource as attention is maybe that's a tragedy of the commons, if it in fact is, attention is actually a common pool resource. I'm like Brett, fascinated with, like, could this be, and how do you dig that out and find out, you know, what are the parts that make it, you know, the definition of the common pool resource.
Totally. And one of the KC projects is, I just saw this misinformation and disinformation in Knowledge Commons, so there you go. Lovely. We have a few minutes left, Bao, so I know it's a fire hose. Any final quick question? If not, we can turn, if any summary thoughts or by way of conclusion here?
Yeah, just thank you all. These have been very helpful feedbacks, and yeah, I will work more on it.
Editor process. No, you're doing great. This is challenging material and important for all of us. So thank you. Thanks a lot, Bao. Yeah.